Heyo, welcome everyone to Today in the Scene by Indie Arcade Wave. I'm Joe, your host, and here on In the Scene, we dive into what's happening in the arcade space from new indie developers, arcade owners, and operators, and just news in the space in general. I'm excited about this week's episode. I've had Nikita on the show a few times, but I've never spoken with Josh about Killer Queen, how it all started, and BumbleBash. So let's dive into what is, and obviously in most people's opinions, the most recognizable indie arcade game, Killer Queen. How you doing, Josh?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you, Joe?
I'm great. I'm excited to finally talk. It's funny that we've been in this space for, I mean, I've been in it for about 6.5 years. You've been in over 10 now, and we've never really run into each other. Like I've been at
Yeah,
KQ events, we never really talked. But we're finally doing it. So
man.
let's introduce yourself. Who is Josh? What do you do? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Josh DeBonis. I am a game designer. I'm the president of BumbleBash Games. My co-designer Nick Mikros and I made Killer Queen that Joe was talking about, and we also, we started a small studio making arcade games since, and I also design tabletop games. You can see behind me a lot of them. Probably best known one that I've designed is called Dice Miner with Atlas Games, and we're just about to put out some expansions for it. And I also teach as an adjunct at the NYU Game Center. So yeah, I mean that's me. The other big thing, which I think we'll be talking about later, that I've been working on lately, is BumbleBash, which I guess we'll get to. But that's been a lot of what my effort has been on recently.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, the second you jumped into the room, I was like, tabletop. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Understand.
yeah,
Killer Queen started as a field game, obviously. I don't know if a ton of people know that, but definitely the KQ, the alumni will know that.
right.
Um, so let's talk about the origins of it. Like, how did you and Nick kind of come up with this idea and start this game? I mean, it's been a decade now. So how
Yeah.
did it all start?
Well, yeah. So Nick and I, we had done a series of these real world field games for a festival called Come Out and Play here in New York, and we did those because like we were both freelancing and like doing contract work for various companies, and we actually met doing some work for a studio called Game Lab that made Diner Dash. That's what they're best known for. But so we became friends with that, and we wanted to do something together, but we didn't really have the time to work on like a big full production. So we did these little experimental games, and they were cool. And we really liked working together. We really liked what we were making. That most of those games, those early games we did, were very much just a spectacle. Like there was one game with a bunch of pinatas where like you like bash the pinatas open and like all kinds of like ping pong balls go flying, and they were really fun, but like it was very much just about creating something like kind of crazy and interesting to look at and watch and to play. And uh, the way Killer Queen came about was we wanted to do something in that style, but that added some more strategy to it. And so I mean, we were just very briefly when I got on talking about the tabletop games. Well, I think the well, when we said, okay, how do we add strategy to this style of game that we've been making, these real world games? We said, okay, let's look at how a lot of these European board games were doing it at the time. It was like right. This was, I guess, about maybe 12 years ago or something, maybe a little longer, and it was like when there was this really big uptick in the popularity of European board games, right? And we were just seeing like so much great design work happening in that space, and so we looked at that, and that's kind of what led to the three ways to win. Not that most of those games have three discrete ways to win, but they usually have several different ways that you can accumulate points. And so we kind of distilled that into our game, and that's kind of where the field game came about. And we didn't set out to make it a video game or certainly an arcade game. We thought that field game would be the final version of it, but it ended up serving as a very strong prototype for what became the arcade game. Which is common for us to do that. Even when we are deliberately making a video game, we almost always start out with a paper prototype or some kind of physical, non-digital prototype that we can use to like iterate much more quickly.
Yeah, so you create this field game based around European board games, give players multiple ways to win, create this element of strategy that you have to cooperate with your teammates to make everything work and, ultimately have one final victory. So, how did you take that from an idea from a field game, from the board game, and move it to an arcade cabinet? And how was that presented the first time?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like when the reason the video game version came about, which it was before we even knew that it would be an arcade game, we just had it on a computer with a projector and a bunch of NES controllers, actually, which we still use for prototyping. This might be one of the original ones. I don't know, but so we and the reason we made it was like the field game version had quite a bit of success for a field game. Like not that there's a lot of opportunities for that, but we were taking it around to a number of festivals, and people really liked it, and it was good. But it was. I mean, I remember even saying like, okay, this is amazing, but like it's so much work to have to carry around like all this equipment because it was like duffel bags filled with these balls and foam swords and buckets and stuff like that, and we said, okay, it would be great if we make a video game. We can just like put it in our backpack, right? And which obviously that didn't happen. If anything, it got bigger. But so we did. So for the same festival, Come Out and Play, we made this video game version, and we showed it there. I actually missed that very first time we showed it. It was my cousin's wedding, but it was a very early version of it, and then we brought it to what for me was like the most magical moment when I realized there was really something there in that game. We brought it to a festival in London called Playing in Public, and we showed it in this theater in an old abandoned train station that was just like, first of all, it was a gorgeous, exciting space, and I just saw an energy around it that, I mean, I know we've all kind of seen it, that I was like, okay, there is something special here. And people were playing it and just really getting into it in a way I hadn't really seen anybody do before with like any games that I was working on, or really maybe anything. I mean, it felt like it had something kind of special. It had something special, And I mean, to this day, it's like hard to even articulate what that is. But that was, to me, that was a real moment of realizing, okay, this is a game we need to really focus on and put more work into.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's doing pretty well. It's in a lot of arcades. Let's talk about the process of kind of taking it from, you've had it to a couple shows, you've seen some success, you're seeing it grow. You guys were the first indie to really break into the arcade space as arcade bars were starting to come back up. So how did you bridge that gap? How did you start reaching out to arcades and start selling
Hmm.
cabinets?
Yeah, well, okay, so yeah, we had been showing it at festivals, and we had one. We had the original prototype here in New York at the NYU Game Center. We would have some events there, and so it got a little bit of recognition, but it wasn't really in any kind of arcade, on a permanent basis. And we somehow heard that Eugene Garrvis was talking about the game. Eugene is, I mean, he's one of the greats. Like, he's old school. He made Defender and Robotron, which is like one of my favorite games, and many many other great games. His company is Raw Thrills, who they're still making um, arcade games, and they're one of the biggest biggest people still making games. And anyway, so we heard that Eugene was talking about it, I think at MGC, and so we somehow got in touch with him. I don't remember exactly how, and he said, "Yeah, come out to Chicago. Let's meet. Let's just talk, and I'll see how I can help you out." Because he wanted to encourage us. And so we did. We flew out there, and we met him at the Hooters at the or by the airport, the Hooters by the airport, and we just, we sat down with like one of our heroes, and he just, we just talked about it, and he told us about the old days and told us about what they're doing now, showed us their office. It was really cool. And, we met, some of the other people at Raw Thrills, and then Eugene took us to Logan Arcade, and introduced us to Zespi there. And he basically told Zespi, you should try putting this game here, and I think it's like when Eugene tells you put a game there, you just do it, and so that's how it ended up at Logan Arcade. That was the first arcade that had Killer Queen, and it we were in New York, so we couldn't see it regularly, but it started to develop a scene around it, and when we found out about that, we were kind of shocked, and it was really exciting. We saw they started a Facebook group to kind of coordinate around it, and they invited us somehow. I'm not sure how they got in touch with us, but so that that all just kind of grew organically from the players and the arcade. I think that the arcade did a lot to help facilitate that, especially in the early days, and then the players and the community around it really. Once it got rolling, they did it on their own, and they're still, Chicago is such a strong scene around Killer Queen. I was just out there for KQ40 with their big tournament. It was really fun. I played in it, and it was a great turnout. So yeah, and then from there, we realized okay, this is a great venue for it. Like we also tested it at around the same time. We tested it at a family entertainment center out in California, and it didn't do so hot there. Just that arcade didn't have the same type of regulars or the same sort of, I guess, sophisticated audience that you get at something like Logan Arcade or like other arcade bars. And we realized, okay, this is like really the prime type of venue for it. And we still see that today, that like most of the strongest locations for it are arcade bars.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. The whole Eugene thing, awesome guy, incredible designer. There's so many classics that he, had a part playing in, even like Smash TV, who he was a little more behind the scenes, but like more blood.
Totally.
And we still see it today. We've met Eugene a handful of times. We just met him. Again, we just ran into him the last time we went to MGC. Still going to the convention every year.
Yeah. Have you had him on your show?
I haven't. He's on the list. I know.
Okay.
He's on the list.
Yeah.
We meant to go out there. We went to Combo Breakers recently. We were gonna go and see the warehouse, but it didn't line up. I think he was out of town or something.
Okay,
so
yeah.
We'll make it happen. But that's hilarious. He wanted to meet at a Hooters. That's the first place to have a business meeting, right?
Of course.
And I love to hear that. Like I just spoke with Zespi on the phone a couple days ago too. So like
cool.
it makes perfect sense that it's in Logan, and great venue. Mm-hmm. Nick's a great guy running the scene there too. So. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about BumbleBash, right? So we've kind of made this whole arc of designing the game, starting to make the game, getting it into arcades, and then you realize you had something, and the scene starts to grow. So you have your first BumbleBash, which was in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken, right? Austin, okay.
Yeah.
So talk about BumbleBash, how that developed, and kind of where it is now, because BumbleBash 5 is just around the corner.
It is, yeah. BumbleBash 5 is happening this October 25th to 27th in Chattanooga. But the way that it came around, BumbleBash 1 was like all of the Killer Queen tournaments up until then, and most of them since, are all community organized. We don't run them. The players do it, the arcades do it, and it's like it really is truly this like grassroots movement that's amazing. And we had stayed out of that. Partially just practically speaking, we just don't have the resources or the time to do that, especially in other cities we don't live in. We did. Actually, we had organized a couple small ones here in New York, before there was really a scene around it. But the most of those happen organically. And then, also we really like the authenticity of it coming from the community, and we didn't want to be like just saying like, okay, this is how it how it has to be or whatever, right? So that was happening for quite a while. These community run events, and I guess. The dates, I don't know. The dates all kind of run together at this point. But basically, a lot of the players in the community started saying, hey, we want to have like a national championship. And they started to encourage us to have one, to run it ourselves. And so we said, okay, yeah, let's try it. And it's funny, Nick and I, we had done all these real world games together, and we'd always had joked about having a an event called like Nick and Josh Fest or something like that. It was like totally a running joke, and but we never actually anticipated in doing it. And then we're like, okay, wait, this is actually Nick and Josh Fest to some degree, and and so we had it in Austin. The reason we did it in Austin, there was just at the time we had just sent the first cabinet to Austin. There was barely a scene yet. Like it was just starting there. But we were working with Eugene and Raw Thrills at the time, and they were having their world championship for Big Buck there. So they said, "Why don't you come do this with us? We'll split the venue and do it together." And we did, and it was cool. Like Big Buck was outside, we were inside, and it was. I think we had one cabinet. I can't remember exactly, but I think there was really only one. It was much smaller than it has been, but it was a really, really exciting tournament. I think some of the footage from that is in the attract screen for the game, where you see everybody kind of like jumping around, celebrating. That's from that space, and yeah, it was really great. I mean, it was cool to have that that first like world championship, and people came from all over, and Austin, even though they had just kind of started, they had a pretty good showing, like, and they were very gracious hosts, like considering like we just kind of said, hey, we're going to be here. They were super cool, and yeah, I mean, and then since we'd had it in Minneapolis, in Portland, and Chattanooga, the last one was in Chattanooga, and we're back there again. It's being hosted at the Old Bailey Station, which is this venue that Mel and Keith run, who are they're a couple, very like a couple players that are very active in the community, and they travel to a lot of tournaments, and then they also kind of help run the local scene there in Chattanooga, and then they happen to run this space, so they offered us to use it, and it's a really great space, and they have a great team, to help make this happen. And so we're really excited to be back in Chattanooga, and especially doing it with them. And I think this it's much bigger than it was that first year. And we're going to have like at least 8 Killer Queens and a bunch of other games there. We're also having, in addition to it being the World Championship for Killer Queen, it's the World Championship for our 2 other games, Black Emperor and Zombies, which is like a single player Killer Queen game that we're just putting an arcade cabinet out for. And then we're going to have like a bunch of other modern arcade games that whatever we can get there. And I mean, we've got a list on our site. If you go to BumbleBash.com, you can see all the games, and if any others that we can get there, we would love to have them. So if anybody has any in the area, or that that we can get there, let me know, please. And it's also like the theme for it this year is that it's our 10th birthday for Killer Queen, which is crazy that it's been a decade. It's kind of flown by. Really, it was shocking when we realized that. And so it was tough to decide, okay, like when exactly is the 10th anniversary of Killer Queen, because there's so many moments when it started. Like, is it the field game you were talking about? Is it the first video game version of it? Is it the arcade cabinet? Is it when it was at Logan Arcade? So like there's all these moments when it kind of started, and we never really launched it exactly. It was like it was this very slow evolution, because the game, we didn't set out to make this type of game, right? It kind of evolved as something very naturally, and that we kind of pivoted towards what was working well, that's our design process in general. I mean, our process is very iterative and very exploratory and experimental. And so, like, we'll start with a core of an idea, but it always ends up being something completely different. I think that the difference here was this game ended up like completely changing the trajectory of our careers. You know, it made us realize, okay, we love working on arcade games. Like we knew, I mean, we always loved playing arcade games, and we had both made a lot of arcade style games that, you know, for like downloadable games and console games and mobile games and things like that. But we were like, we realized, okay, we love the physical aspect of this. So I know that's sort of a tangent. But yeah, I mean, BumbleBash, I think that the trajectory of BumbleBash has changed a little bit, and then it started like the very first one really was just the championship for Killer Queen, and then we realized like, okay, we want to make this bigger than just Killer Queen. Like we want to use it. I mean, partially as a venue for our own games, but also as a way to help grow this whole scene, like what you guys are doing, what, you know, lots of other people are doing in this space, and like the, you know, we call it like the modern arcade, or like, I know you're saying like the indie arcade space, like, and you know what, like at BumbleBash 4, we had roundtables for arcade developers, for arcade operators, for scene moms, you know, and like all these like little, you know, smaller communities within the scene, you know, giving everybody opportunities to talk amongst ourselves. Like I really enjoyed the arcade devs roundtable that we had. It was really good just to talk to everybody about what we're doing, and we can all just kind of share our experience and help each other out, help each other grow. And then also just as you know, as an opportunity for other devs to show their games and for players to see other games, you know, because it's like most of the games that we're all doing, like there's not that many cabinets in the world, and if you don't happen to live in the city with that cabinet, it's really tough to play. So to bring all these together in one place, I think is part of the goal. And you know, and I think, you know, some people are only interested in the Killer Queen part, and that's fine too. But like, we really want to encourage people to like see all these other games. And for us, it's about like making this festival for the modern arcade. You know, I mean, it's we think it's a really exciting space to be in, and we want to encourage other people to do it, and we want to help kind of grow all of us. You know, it's like the rising tide, you know, helping all of us grow. Like, it's not, we don't see the other devs as competitors. I know you feel the same way. And we're all kind of in this together, you know, helping each other, because it's a tough space to be in, right? And so like any kind of incremental gains are good for everybody, and growing the whole space, and especially like the arcade bar scene, I think is good for all of us. And these games, they do well together. You know, it's like I'm sure you've probably seen with yours, but like, I mean, with like Killer Queen, it, you know, if it's the only game at a place, it doesn't do that great. And especially if it's like, you know, well, certainly if it's the only game, it's really tough. But if it's with other like very different games, it also can be tough. And like, but you know, at like here in New York, one place it's at is Wonderville, where like, you know, all the games there are like super weird, experimental indie games. Like Killer Queen is like one of the most normal games there, and so like it, you know, it does really well in places like that where it's kind of among similar work, you know, and like players can spend time with each game, you know, depending on like what, and find exactly what interests them, and also, you know, they have like a wide range to choose from, and spend more time over the night, right? Like you don't get bored, right? You can like try different things.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm excited for Bumble Bash 5. It'll be the third one I go to. I went to the one in Minneapolis not knowing what it was. Like we were just kind of developing the cabinet,
Yeah.
figuring out like because we were that up down you guys held it at actually told us like if we build a cabinet we'll demo your cabinet. So they were the first location we ever went into.
Oh, cool.
That was like kind of our local arcade because we're all just south of the cities.
Yeah.
Um, so like going in there and it was shoulder to shoulder, like there's multiple cabinets along the top. I was like, this is pretty crazy. And then I ended up going to Chattanooga the next time, and
Hmm.
that was awesome. Which that was the first time you guys had like all the indies there. I think we had Switch
Hmm.
and Shoot, Cosmotrons, Armed and Gelatinous, GBG, Death Ball. Pretty sure that was everybody. There were like
Sounds right.
six
Yeah.
other indies, and then you guys were also showing off Black Emperor too. So
Hmm.
that was the first time that like it became an indie space, and I thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
Driving 14 hours with we had our white cabinet in the back. I had never seen it. Like we had just finished our first and
Oh,
only white
wow.
cabinet we ever made,
Yeah.
and they packed it up in the truck and then picked me up, and they were like, "We're going." So I had to wait the whole drive to see
Oh,
it.
wow. That's
Um,
cool. I didn't realize that. Nice.
yeah, and that was our debut showing that one off, and it
Cool.
was a great time being out there,
Mhm.
just meeting the community and letting everybody play. And you're right about the community being so inclusive. Like everybody, just like anybody that reaches out to me that's like, I need to figure out how to build a cabinet. I'm like, go to Mark, go to Dan,
Hmm.
talk to somebody that's built a cabinet, and I
Totally.
need help designing. It's like, okay, these guys develop. Like here's a guy who's coded this game and that game. And it's like it's just sharing resources with anybody that we can,
Yeah. Yeah, for
and
sure.
and I love that. I think that's the coolest thing about the space. It's why I want to continue to help grow the space.
Hmm.
And I think one other thing that I was really curious about because I don't think I ever really talked to Nick about it, but I did talk to Tomas about it, and that was
Yeah.
how you guys acquired Black Emperor. Like I think a lot of people think you guys were the developers behind the game, but you
Mhm.
actually found it at a convention and brought Tomas on to publish the game. So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about how that went down.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, Tomas was a grad student at the NYU Game Center. And I actually saw a very early version of the game. It was his thesis project. And I saw it, I did like a critique of it, when it was very, very rough. But, and at that point, I think it was so rough, it didn't grab me, to be honest, because it was just an early prototype, right? But it was cool, and it was clear to me that Tomas was and is a very talented designer. And then we went to the student show at the end of the year, and he was showing a much more finished version of it there. And but it was a phone game, and he had it. I think it was like he must have had the phone on a table, but then like a screen attached to it or something. So there was sort of a spectator experience there at the show. And Nick and I both independently played it. We weren't really walking around together at the show. We played it, and we both noticed a lot of the Killer Queen players had come also, and they were attracted to it too. And it was a great game. Um, so afterwards, I think, like the next day or whatever, Nick and I both said to each other, "Oh, there was this game there that like you got to check out called Black Emperor," and and we both knew that it was a good fit for us. Like we wanted to put out another arcade machine, something very different than Killer Queen, and something that we at least thought that we could put out very quickly. It turned out to be, a lot more work and a lot longer than we expected, as it always is, to get it out. But the idea was like, okay, let's do something quick because like we want to have like a second game in our portfolio as far as arcade games. And so we then worked with Tomas to like figure out how to make it an arcade game, because I mean it was like an arcade style game, but the controls were like a touch screen, and it really was like intended, as like as a mobile game, and also it was just like more of like an experimental prototype. It didn't have all the trappings around it to make it like an actual like commercial game. So we spent a lot of time all kind of working together to figure out what the control scheme should be that led to the wheel that's on it now, and the button. And yeah, I mean, so that became a big process, and then like just designing the cabinet and figuring out how to manufacture it and all. And we for us it was like it was a very different process from Killer Queen, because like with Killer Queen we never expected it to be a commercial product. And even like the first cabinet, we designed it thinking that would be the only cabinet. It was we thought it would just be like a one-off like art project. And so here we really set out knowing much more. I mean, we knew nothing about making arcade games when we started doing Killer Queen. So when we started building Black Emperor, we knew much more. Um, and now that we've done it, I think we know even much more. And we're constantly learning. And but so because we set out intentionally to make it a commercial product, it was a very different process. And in some ways that helps as far as like practically speaking. It's much easier to manufacture, and it's it's designed to be intentionally like easy to maintain. And some of these things that like were pitfalls for us early on with Killer Queen, because we just didn't think that way. Neither of us had ever been like a tech in an arcade, and so like the early Killer Queens were like really hard to work on, right? And then as we learned how to improve those, like we incorporated things that we learned into the design, and it became much stronger. But so anyway, it was nice to be able to start with that at the beginning. The flip side is, knowing that it needs to be a commercial product in some ways like forces you to be a little bit more conservative. Like had we gone into Killer Queen with that mindset, we probably wouldn't have made such a weird, unusual game, right? And so it is kind of a double-edged sword, and but also a practical consideration. Now that we're like doing this like as a business, right? Like we need to make something that makes money for our customers, for the arcades, and that holds up and is stable. And so like those are all considerations that we're taking in at this point. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, we still have a great relationship with Tomas. I'm actually going to see him Friday. He lives in Milan now, but I just happen to be going out there on vacation, so I'm gonna get to hang out with him. It's been quite a while since I've seen him in person. And he's still doing some work on the game, adding like new little features here and there. I mean, it's a pretty simple game, so it doesn't need a lot new. But yeah, it's still being actively worked on. We're still doing new stuff, and we are just about to make a new run of machines at Fun Company, where we make Killer Queen too. So yeah, I think that's it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, I think that's definitely a cool way that the relationship happened. It's just right place, right time, basically. Like he just happened to go to the
Yeah.
right school where you guys would end up finding out about him, and
Yeah.
you happened to work at the school. It's like all these things just kind of clicked. And it's like you were saying with like everything growing over time. It's just, the longer you're in the space, the longer you put yourself out there, the more connections are made, and the
Yep.
more people you can help. Really, is kind of how it ends up being.
Totally.
And I love that. I'm excited for BumbleBash. I'm excited to play KQ again. I'm excited to see all the other developers there. Hopefully, we get a lot of developers out there, and it'd be awesome to like have a panel and everything. So we'll get all those details hashed out. But
Hmm.
that's all I had for you, Josh. So I guess just shout out social medias. Where can people follow along on the journey, and keep up with BumbleBear?
Yeah, yeah. Definitely follow our Instagram, Bumble Bear Games, and also Killer Queen Arcade. Or no, I think it's Killer Queen Game on Instagram. But mainly follow Bumble Bear Games, and we're also on Facebook, and we have a Discord. If you go to our website, you can find the link to the Discord. It's bumblebeargames.com. And I guess bumblebash.com for all the info on BumbleBash. If you want to come or you want to send a game there, or get involved in any way, definitely we want it to have as many people there as possible. So yeah, go check that out. And that again, that's in October 25th to 27th in Chattanooga. And then, if you can't make it, we will be streaming the tournaments online, so you can watch it online. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time. I'm excited for BumbleBash. We'll put everything down in the description so you guys can check that out. Um, thanks for coming on. For anybody
Great.
that's still watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us a ton. The wave will continue to grow and we can all ride it together. We have both models of Galactic Battleground available for sale, the Konami and the tabletop, as well as the t-shirts. And the Indie Arcade Wave website is live. So if you're looking at getting an arcade game that is in the indie space, pretty much everybody's on there. I have a few more to add on that are a little bit smaller right now, but you can look up Killer Queen on there, Black Emperor on there. Zombies will eventually be added on there once we get a little more info on it. And, everybody else in the space is there. So go check that out and let us know if you want to grab a cabinet from anybody. But until next time, peace.